Three, two. Well, hello and welcome into New York's Asset Protection Roundtable, a three pillars of protection program. I'm Ben George. He's Ted Alatis over at the Alatis Law Firm there in Brooklyn, New York. You can find him online, alatislawfirm.com. Ted, we got another mailbag episode. I know we get a lot of feedback on the show. I know you appreciate answering the questions, but I know it's always valuable because we're able to cover a different, kind of a range of topics. So if somebody's not interested in something specifically, hopefully over the course of a mailbag episode, we can answer some questions and touch on something they've been thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the mailbag questions are great, and keep them coming.
Yeah, definitely. You can always connect with us, alatislawfirm.com, to send those in. I'm going to start off a little a meatball, I guess, here, or softball for you before we get into our hard hitting questions. But a little getting to know you. I know you spend a lot of time in the office, and you got a lot of time maybe in traffic around New York. So how, when you actually get home, how do you actually relax after a long day?
Well, I mean, hopefully I'm home early enough to catch a good ball game. I'm a big Yankees fan, so if the Yankees are on, I'm certainly sitting kicking back on in my lounge chair watching the Yankees, maybe having a little ice cold lemonade or something like that. And that that's pretty good for the summer months. But and in the winter months, maybe I'm hang out in the backyard a little bit if it's warm enough. Maybe with a little cigar or something like that before the sun comes down, or if the sun's already down, maybe just after sunset, doing that a little bit. Occasionally, maybe catching up with some reading or TV show I haven't seen in a while or something like that, or kind of a maybe a good comedy or something like that, just to get my mind off things. So those are typically the types of things I do to just chill, as we say.
Well, you probably had a pretty nice little last couple of months following the Yankees, as they've gotten off to a pretty scorching start.
So far, so good.
Yeah, been a good start to the year. I know a lot of Yankees fans around New
Jacob,
York, and Mets fans. The Mets have been also really good as well this year.
The Mets have been great too, and Jacob Rupert, who used to own the Yankees in the 1920s, said a good day at the ballpark started with the Yankees scoring 9 runs in the first and then slowly pulling away. So, yeah, that's.
I love that. I love that. All right, so we got a mailbag edition today. Again, we take your questions. So if you have anything that you want to run by Ted and get some thoughts on, anything on your mind that you're curious about, you can always send it in to us through the website, but also jot down this number. You can always call Alatis Law Firm as well and speak with them directly and talk about your specific situation. That number, 718-233-2903. All right, let's lead off with Lydia here. Says, my own parents are the most involved with our children right now. However, my parents will be rather old when the children are old enough to be out on their own. So should we choose the best guardians for right now, or should we pick the best guardians for down the road? It's a good question.
That is an excellent question, and it's one of the most difficult questions that we have to answer, right? Because at the end of the day, what you want from a guardian is someone who not only has enough of a rapport with the children so that their authority and their relationship with the children can be respected by the children themselves, but also has a sense of responsibility and understanding of what yours and your spouse's ethics and desires are with regards to raising the children. And certainly your own parents are a great example of that. And generally speaking, they're going to have a really good relationship, hopefully, with the children, for when they're really, really young and as they get older. I think it's important to kind of balance, how old the kids are with how old you are and how old your parents are in this scenario. Lydia, if your parents are, exceedingly mature and, incapable of handling things for themselves, and then, maybe they're not the right selection to be the primary guardians, but they can certainly be involved. There was a book, a couple of decades ago. It takes a village, right, to raise children. So at the end of the day, having as many people involved, certainly is helpful as possible, right? So, getting that involvement is great. So I think I would personally recommend, selecting who it is that you feel is appropriate for now, with the idea that there's going to possibly be some changes to that as you grow older and as your children grow older.
Is that something people change very much through the years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I would say of all the fiduciaries, I think the guardians are generally the ones that are changed the most, because so a lot of different things can change that dynamic, right? So divorce is one of them, right? There could be one set of parents that both of them agree, both parties agree, or both parents agree on as being the appropriate fit, and then suddenly there's a divorce, and now that the parties have a completely different mindset, right? So that's a major factor. Age, an enormous factor in the consideration, and financial ability as well, right? So all of those things make a big difference, right? So it like I said, it's important that whoever it is that you're selecting in that role has an established relationship with the child or children, so that it's more natural, should that disastrous consequence occur.
Yeah, because it seems like something that you could obviously spend a lot of time thinking through and trying to make sure you get right. But knowing that, hey, it can change down the road, it's almost better to make sure you get somebody down rather than worrying about, do I have the exact right person for forever?
Right. And you know, one of the things that we always forget about in this analysis is, just because one person or persons may be the guardians, there may be other ways to kind of check that, right? Or at least to assist that by having a trustee manage the financial aspects of the raising of the children, and have the guardians who are separate from the trustees, right? So there's lots of different ways where you can get a lot of people involved, have a lot of supervision and involvement, so that it becomes a more natural um, and a more stable environment.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because it takes us into our next question that came in from Charles, kind of along the same line of thinking here. He says, my wife's sister and her husband will be the guardians for our children, but they are terrible with finances. Are we allowed to pick someone else to manage the money, even though they are the guardians? Would that make things harder? So you mentioned the trustee, that kind of setup. So can you take us into some detail on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So generally speaking, what you want to do is make sure that there's someone who has legal authority for the children. That would be the guardians. And that'd be the person who's responsible for raising the children, person or persons. And then the trustee would be handling the financial affairs. And sometimes it's easy, and you can trust the guardians to be the persons who manage the finances as well. But sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it isn't so easy, and sometimes it can be very overwhelming, right? So having a trustee who's different from your guardians makes a lot of sense in those scenarios, and again offers that additional guidance, sort of has the ability to create a sort of a committee, so that if the guardian is overwhelmed with some of the legal decisions, the financial decisions don't overwhelm him or her even more, and they can work together, right? Sort of work as a team to help raise a child.
All right. Great question, Charles. Hopefully that helps you out there as well. I got one more. This one from Ruth. Ruth says, I am one of 5 children. There's always been some animosity between the siblings. My parents' health is failing, and I know they have a plan put together, but I have no idea what it says or who is in charge. Would it be a good idea to have a family meeting? I would like to know what's coming so I can mentally prepare.
Hmm. Wow, that is a great question, right? So one of the things that people want to try to do with estate planning is kind of avoid arguments when they're gone, right? So there's a school of thought that basically says you can avoid arguments when you're gone by having the arguments while you're alive. So you're kind of put in that very complicated scenario. I certainly think that overall the comfort level of having family discussions is really dependent upon the message or messaging that's coming from the parents who are making the decisions. If the parents are uncomfortable having those conversations, it's going to be very difficult to do that in a comfortable way when one of the children is pushing it. So there has to be a real dialogue between members of the family, with the parents, so that some of these wishes, some of these intentions can be made clear. Now, parents are often in a very difficult spot, especially if they're not necessarily dividing everything in what somebody may consider an equal fashion. And I think we've talked about this before, that equal isn't necessarily fair. So it's a tough call. I always prefer to err on the side of communication, because it does clear up misunderstandings later. And if a conversation can be had in a respectful way, then it should be had. But if it's just going to lead to more animosity and more enmity, probably avoiding the conversation or not instigating the conversation may be the way to go. Again, I think it falls on parents having that conversation in a manner that befits the family dynamic.
Is there any way to find out if you are one of the fiduciaries chosen without getting that information directly from the person who has the estate plan? Like if I was chosen to be a guardian, could I ask you if I knew you were the estate planning attorney for a friend of mine and get a yes or no answer from you? Is that something like that possible?
No. So the answer is without authority from the person who would be my client, and in that instance, the person who's making the estate plan or who's doing the estate plan, without authorization, I would not be permitted to communicate that information to
Okay.
someone. Yeah. So no.
Okay, good to know. Communication is key, and also I'll point you to our last episode because we get into communication quite a bit on that, about what you should be telling these different fiduciaries and making sure that they're on the loop. What you should be telling them, what's too much, what's the key information. So kind of all ties into this set of mailbag questions we got today. But make sure you check that out after this episode's done, and please also subscribe to the show as well. If you have any questions for us that you'd like to answer on the show, you can always send them in. alatsaslawfirm.com is the website. You can also listen to podcasts, get a lot of other resources around estate planning, and also schedule a meeting directly through the website. But if you'd prefer to call, you can always do that. 718-233-2903. All right, Ted, great conversation as always, and always good to hear from people and the questions they have. These are great circumstances and scenarios, and I know that we'll often find ourselves in similar positions, so it's always good to kind of hear how these things play out.
Yes, absolutely, Ben. Terrific conversation as always, and keep those questions coming.
Thank you for listening to New York's Asset Protection Roundtable, a 3 pillars of protection program. For Ted Alatsis, I am Ben George. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.